Simpson people. They were excellent fishermen. They knew how to harvest fish. They had a real keen capability of that. There was no wanton waste. They used what they caught. They would either eat it when they caught it, or they learned how to preserve it through smoking and fermentation, that kind of stuff. And they recognized the life cycle of the species they were targeting. Like they knew, for example, that you had to let a certain number of salmon get by a river of fish traps. Otherwise, within 5 years, there was no more salmon coming up through. So they practiced escapement. Now, they had their own word for it, but they recognized that if you caught every single fish, that eventually there'd be no more fish coming through. So they were conservatives also. And then you actually took it to a different level. If you've ever seen the Clinkett, Simpson people who are dressed in their formal native garb, sometimes they depict like halibut and salmon and creatures like that. So they took it to a spiritual level also. When Western civilization first arrived, of course, it was the Russian people that came here in droves initially. And I say in droves, it was mostly military. They enslaved the native people, and they were targeting their product was sea otters. And they had a triangle trade situation going where the otter's fur would be traded to China, and tea would then be traded to Russia, and they had that thing going. And they basically harvested that to almost extinction. And then if you read, depending upon whether you're in high school or college, in high school you might have read in history, once they exhausted the otter resource, they decided Alaska was no longer of any value to them, so they began the negotiations to sell it to the United States. But that's not what really happened. If you look at your history, in the 1850s, that's when Russia lost the Crimean War to the English. And they recognized that the English were working their way across North America from the east to the west through Canada, through the Hudson Bay Trading Company. And they also recognized they probably couldn't defend it. If the English wanted it, they were probably going to be able to take it. So they're trying to get something from nothing before they turned out to nothing. And it almost, the trade to the United States almost happened, the purchase almost happened in the 1850s, but Seward recognized, the Secretary of State recognized that the Civil War was impending, and that kind of got put on a back burner. But after the war was over, 2 years later, the sale was made, and Alaska became part of the United States. Initially, we weren't even a territory. We were a military district overseen by the Navy. And there was almost no overseeing or oversight of any kind of extraction of resources. So, I mean, companies from Lower 48 came out and just started stripping forest, taking every single tree, and of course erosion, and it wasn't even an issue for them. They'd run nets all the way across open rivers to catch every single salmon coming through. Eventually there was no more fish there, they moved to another river. That kind of thing went on for a while until we finally became a territory, and then finally we started having a little bit of a handle on the resource extraction. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. You can read as well as I can, probably better. I've been diagnosed as being dyslexic, but there's a couple here that don't jump out at you that are really important. I want to point them out. This is one here. In 1954, Senator Saltonstall was from Massachusetts, as was JFK at the time. This is 6 years before he became president. But what this did was the first time the federal government ever set money aside specifically for supporting the industry of commercial fishing. And not only was the first time it ever happened, but it also is still an act of Congress. Last year, for example, in this particular facility, we received $1.5 million to assist the kind of work that we're trying to accomplish here. And then another one that's really important, and it's, again, I didn't make this, so I don't know why Ted's name didn't get put here, but it is mentioned here. This is the Magnuson-Stevens Act. And Magnuson was a senator from Washington State. Back in those days, he and Ted were buddies. But what this did, amongst other things, but how most notable is we recognized as what used to be recognized as a 3-mile federal limit of water off our shores got pushed out to a 200-mile federal limit. And what that did is effectively remove foreign fleets from our shores and put them out in the ocean, and made us manage our waters that much more effectively. Now, the North Pacific is recognized internationally as the best managed ocean fishery on a planet. And what I bring home from it is it didn't just happen, but it was due to